Just a small update on the 66 Galaxie project of Austin's. We've got all the wiring laid out basically here, figuring it out, repairing it. Car's over here under the cover, still waiting to come alive. Basically the wiring harness improvements, we've got to replace the fuse box with a newer fuse box, added a couple circuits, ability to add more circuits. It was only a 5-circuit fuse box to begin with, and we've got 12 there now we can use. Breaks over to the dimmer switch, comes down to the emergency flasher, which is an add-in harness that interrupts the harness going to the steering column for the blinkers. Had to add a few wires for instrument cluster, and still have a few more to add that were chewed up a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. Come across with the indicators for temperature and oil, flasher, which will be replaced with an electronic flasher for LED lights. Rolls over to the ignition switch, which had a different pigtail and a different connector on it for a different ignition switch. We left that alone, just redid the wire nuts instead of using wire nuts. We've got it all soldered up now. This runs over to the heater control and off to the actual blower motor control, which actually goes outside underneath the firewall. And this needs to be fixed right there still. There's some area where we're crimped together for the door switch. Coming back out, I only have one of the underhood harnesses hooked up right now. The other connector is for the secondary underhood harness that drives the basically the instruments, the LED, the warning bulbs. We'll be putting gauges in, mechanical gauges, but we may keep the other idiot lights just in case, just to have them. Pretty simple harness. We're adding relays for the fan, the horn, the high and low beam, just to keep that current run from having to go all the way in the car through the switches and back. The fan will be electric fan. It'll stay out under the hood control wise and have a mechanical, probably mechanical or electronic thermostat on it. Comes over and hooks into the regulator. Those are both harnesses that go across the radiator support, and they're chopped right there. They were burned at one point and hacked together with twist ties and all kind of other stuff. So cut those off, replace the big primary current wire with some 10 gauge wire, 8 gauge wire I think. We'll be running that back over to the starter solenoid. That's the headlight bucket there. So looking at the core of the wiring for 66 Galaxie is really not too complicated compared to other cars. This is the secondary harness that was unplugged a while ago in the earlier. Like I said, it has the oil pressure, hot and low temp sensors on it, but it also does have the start that goes to the starter solenoid and the run that actually goes back through a resistor wire that we will be eliminating since this car will be running EFI. We don't want to limit any voltage off to the coil. But that piece needs to be trimmed back and extended. Any wires we don't use, we can use to get a wire from inside the car out to the hood. Let's give some idea where the main underhood of the harness is going to be run. We're going to mount the relays on this area that would easily make a good mounting point. We can then tee into the main harness to interrupt the high-low and horn to run the relays on it. Headlight, run out to the headlight buckets. This gives enough room to run it behind the fender, kind of hide it back underneath there once it's all rewrapped. And we'll run across the radiator support up underneath where the horns mount, everything mounts up front, kind of hide it all after it's wrapped back up. Should be enough to go both ways. The regulator's kind of just stuck in there right now, but it mounts up above that, and it will also follow that same run. It goes over the starter solenoid. It mounts on that flat spot on the fender, inner fender on that side. So before we were looking at the 66 Galaxie internal wiring harness from 1966. This is the EFI harness, late 80s, early 90s, EEC-IV that we'll be using to drive the fuel injection on the 66. Kind of starts over here at the computer connector that'll be mounted up inside on the right hand side of the passenger compartment. Have the lines that go back and drive the fuel pump in the back, the high and low pressure pumps in the back with a sensor wire that comes back. Got a couple relays that will turn the ECC switch power on and the oxygen sensor power. Got a wide open throttle relay, so it'll switch out the AC if we need to. We'll have to get all that wired up when we mess with the AC stuff. It gets us through the firewall and that grommet right there. Coming with some canister perch and EGR controls. We'll get rid of those with some resistors to tell the computer that they're there, but we're not using them basically. And then we run off to a couple other runs. I think that's mass air running up to there. That'll be up underneath the right front fender area. Got a bunch of big grounds because the computer loves a good ground. Got a O2 and neutral sensors that'll run down the tranny and down to the O2 sensors. Probably end up tapping in and getting the neutral signal back inside the car, or maybe we'll feed that back from outside under the hood. We'll have to see how that goes. Big long skinny one loops back around to a connector to drive the MSD box. If we get the MSD box, we'll be using that to let it trigger the coil instead of the TFI stuff doing it. That is the TFI connector that'll be going up to the distributor to get that signal. And we roll out over to the test connector that'll be sitting back underneath the hood somewhere in a hidden location, so we can plug into it, get any readouts we want. Got your map sensor there to get the barometric pressure sensing information needed by a mass air engine. You've got your salt and pepper connectors. That's what will connect to the motor. So this is what ends up being on the motors. That bit of harness there drives the injectors, all the temp sensors, all the sensors, including air temp and idle air and engine, and drives all the injectors. So it's not too complicated. It's probably, a little more than what's on the car itself maybe, but I think we can lay all that out and get it routed up underneath the fenders and keep it clean but effective.